Hello, everybody. This is Miss Kara with the Mountainburg Public Library. Hope this finds you guys doing well. So today for April 13th, story time, and in continuation of celebrating April's National Poetry Month, I'm going to read to you today Paul Revere's Ride. So this poem was actually written by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, who lived from 1807 to 1882. He was born February 27th in Portland, Maine, New England, and his father, who was a prominent lawyer, did expect him to follow in his footsteps and also become a lawyer. And I don't think that's really what Henry wanted to do. So, with that, he was offered a position in 1825 upon his graduation of college. He was offered a position to teach modern languages at Bowdoin, but on the condition that he first traveled to Europe at his own expense to research the languages. So there were some conditions before he could go ahead and do that, which is what he really wanted to do. He became a prolific writer. He has written many poems, short stories, things of that nature, and he wrote even other publications known as the Ballads and Other Poems, which contain The Wreck of the Hesperus and The Village Blacksmith. So during that time, when he wrote those, he also taught full-time at Harvard, and he directed the modern language department. So he was super busy, super busy. So in the last 20 years of his life, he continued to enjoy fame and honors bestowed on him in both Europe and America. And a lot of people really didn't know how much his personal life affected his writing. It did in very different ways. He was ill at some point in 1882, and he endured a lot of pain before his death on March 24th in 1882. They think that he had periodontitis, and he also had severe stomach pains that caused him a lot of problems. So at the time of his death, he was one of the most successful writers in America. So we want to particularly read today, we want to read his Midnight Ride of Paul Revere. So who was Paul Revere? Paul Revere was born in Boston's North End at what we think is the date around 1734. The exact date is unknown. So he was born to a French Huguenot father who ran a silversmith shop and a mother from a local family. We're talking 1734. We don't have a lot of information on Paul Revere, on the actual Paul Revere. So he did, the young Paul Revere was educated in reading and writing in school, and before completing his training as an apprentice in the silversmith, at age 19, he inherited the business. He completed his training as an apprentice to his silversmith father. And then at age 19, his father actually passed away, and the business was then was then given to him. So shortly after that happened, though, he left the family business and he enlisted in the Provincial Army in 1756 during the French and Indian War. So this is where Longfellow's poem comes in, to where we've got Paul Revere's Ride by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. This book itself is illustrated by Charles Santori, and we're going to read it today. Okay, here we go. Get it in. There we go. Listen, my children, and you shall hear of the midnight ride of Paul Revere. On the 18th of April in 75, hardly a man is now alive. Who remembers the day, that famous day and year? He said to his friend, "If the British march by land or sea from the town tonight, hang a lantern aloft in the belfry arch of the North Church Tower as a signal light. One if by land and two if by sea, and I on the opposite shore will be, ready to ride and spread the alarm through every Middlesex village and farm, for the country's folk to be up and to arm." Here we go. Then he said good night, and with a muffled oar, silently roared to the Charleston shore, just as the moon rose over the bay, where the swinging wide at her mooring lay, the Somerset British man-o'-war. A phantom ship with each mast and spar, across the moon like a prison bar, and a huge black hulk that was magnified by its own reflection in the tide. Meanwhile, his friends through the alley and street wanders and watches with eager ears, till the silence around him he hears the muster of men at the barrack door, the sound of arms and the tramp of feet and the measured tread of the grenadiers marching down to their boats on the shore. Then he climbed to the tower of the Old North Church by the wooden stairs with a stealthy tread, to the belfry chamber overhead, and startled the pigeons from their perch on the somber rafters that round him made masses and moving shapes of shade by the trembling ladder steep and tall to the highest window in the wall, where he paused to listen and look down a moment on the roofs of the town and the moonlight flowing over all. Beneath the churchyard lay the dead in their night encampment on the hill, wrapped in silence so deep and still they could hear, like a sentinel's tread, the watchful night wind as it went, creeping along from tent to tent, all seeming to whisper, "All is well." A moment only he feels the spell of the place and the hour and the secret dread of the lonely belfry and the dead, for suddenly all his thoughts are bent on the shadowy something far away, where the river widens to meet the bay, and the line of black that bends and floats on the rising tide like a bridge of boats. Meanwhile, impatient to mount and ride, booted and spurred with a heavy stride, on the opposite shore walked Paul Revere. Now he patted his horse's side, now gazed at the landscape far and near, then impetuous stamped the earth, and turned and tightened his saddled girth. But mostly he watched with eager search the belfry tower of Old North Church, as it rose above the graves on the hill, lonely and spectral and somber and still. And lo, he looks on the belfry's height, a glimmer and then a gleam of light. Way up here, wait, way up here. He springs to the saddle, the bridle he turns, but linger and gazes till full on his sight a second lamp in the belfry burns. A hurry of hooves in the village street, a shape in the moonlight, a bulk in the dark, and beneath from the pebbles in passing a spark, struck out by the steed flying fearless and fleet. That was all, and yet, through the gloom and the light, the fate of a nation was riding that night, and the spark struck out across by that steel in his flight, kindled the land into flames with its heat. He has left the village and mounted the steep, and beneath him, tranquil and broad and deep, is the mystic meeting the ocean tides. and under the adlers that skirt its edge, now soft on the sand, now loud on the ledge, is heard the tramp of his steed as he rides. It was 12 by the village clock when he crossed the bridge into Melford town. He heard the crowing of the cock and the barking of the farmer's dog, and felt the damp of the river fog that rises after the sun goes down. It was one by the village clock when he galloped into Lexington. He saw the gilded weather crock swim in the moonlight as he passed. And the meeting house windows, blank and bare, gaze at him with a spectral glare. And if they already stood aghast at the bloody work that they would look upon, it was 2 by the village clock when he came to the bridge in Concord town. He heard the bleating of the flock and the twitter of birds among the trees, and felt the breath of the morning breeze blowing over the meadows brown, and once was safe asleep in his bed, who at the bridge would be the first to fall, who that day would be lying dead, pierced by a British musket ball. You know the rest in the books you have read, how the British regulars fired and fled, how the farmers gave them ball for ball from behind each fence and farmyard wall, chasing the redcoats down the lane, then crossing the fields to emerge again under the trees as the turn of the road, and only pausing to fire and load. So through the night rode Paul Revere, and so through the night went his cry of alarm to every Middlesex village and farm, a cry of defiance and not of fear, a voice in darkness, a knock at the door, a word that shall echo forevermore. For borne on the night wind of the past, through all our history to the last, in the hour of darkness and peril and need, the people will waken and listen to hear the hurrying hoofbeats of that steed and the midnight message of Paul Revere. Pretty good, huh? I thought it was pretty good. So that was the entire poem of Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. So, it was great. It is so great. It's just thrilling. You feel like you're on that ride, on that horse, trying to get to all of those towns to alert them that the British were coming. The British were coming. So, just awesome. Just absolutely awesome. So, what I wanted to let you know, if you do want any more information on this, of course, there's a wealth of information that we have here available at the library, including the actual book of Paul Revere's Ride. I did want to give you just a little bit more information about, so Paul Revere himself, we have found out that he took part in the Stamp Act protests of 1765, which eventually led the Crown to repeal a tax that ignited the colonists' hatred of taxation without representation. I know this is a lot of information to get on story time, but I just wanted to fill you in on this a little bit. So, okay, he first used his signal. Am I right? Hold on. This is what I want. Okay. As Revere was settling into his Boston home in the early 1770s, he became active politically. He responded to the new laws and tea imports that bypassed Boston's merchants by attending secret meetings with inner circle people who planned the Boston Tea Party. Revere joined other activists and dumped the tea from the British East India Company on December 16th, 1773, into Boston's harbor. So if anybody has read or heard about the Boston Tea Party, that's what they're talking about. Paul Revere was involved in that, as so the records show. His activism extended beyond the confines of Boston. We do know that he actually worked as a courier and rode from Boston to New York on horse to spread information about the colonies. When his associates learned that the British were moving troops out of Boston and planned to arrest revolutionary leaders, Samuel Adams and John Hancock, in Lexington, Massachusetts, Revere was tasked with tipping them off to help them avoid arrest. So he first used this signal system, which is the two lanterns that Longfellow then relates back into the poem that he did about it. So he used that first signal system, and he had two lanterns that he placed on top of the Old North Church steeple in Boston to alert those on the harbor that the troops had left Boston and were crossing the Charles River. Then at about 10 p.m. on April 18th, 1775, so we're coming up on 5 more days and we're going to have an anniversary of this, okay? Revere set out in the dark from his North Boston home by horse with 2 other riders to reach Adams and Hancock. The riders met the pair, in Lexington and enabled the revolutionaries to avoid arrest. So that's why he did it. That was the ride of Paul Revere. So the poem, you don't take the poem word for word, nor can you take this history of him saving Sam Adams and saving, where did I put my piece of paper? Saving Sam Adams and his buddy that I had on here, that I will find. Saving Sam Adams and John Hancock from being arrested. So he was able to do that. He saved them that. So for this week's Take and Make kit, I know my camera is over here a little bit. Wait, a little bit. Okay, here we go. For this week's Take and Make kit, you're going to be making your own Paul Revere lantern. Let me talk to you. Talk to the camera. You're going to be making your own Paul Revere lantern. So this will be a Take and Make kit that will be available by the end of this week. And I think you're going to have a great time with it. Thank you for joining Miss Kara for story time. I have enjoyed it immensely every week coming to you for the last year, 13, 14, 15 months that I have come to you virtually. I do appreciate all of my patrons that have come in to see us since we've been opened. We hope to have in-person programming back really soon. I know that we've been working on our summer reading program that's going to be coming up, and we've got some really great stuff planned for you then, as well as some in-person outdoor activities that are going to be great for the kids. So with that, Miss Kara wants to bid you farewell. I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your week. Remember to always read. Keep reading, everybody, okay? But most importantly, please remember to always stay safe, stay healthy, and remember to always have fun. Miss Kara loves you guys. Thanks.